In my past life, I reunited with Ryan Carter at a grand birthday banquet. It was a lavish 60th birthday celebration he hosted for his wife, Susan Carter. The venue was filled with prestigious guests, and even the cake stood as tall as two people. Everyone was dressed in elegant attire, raising their glasses in celebration. As a cleaning staff member, I stood quietly in the corner when I suddenly caught sight of a familiar face. Though he had aged, I could never forget the vermilion mole beneath his eye. His tailored black suit accentuated his upright posture, despite his graying hair. He wore gold-rimmed glasses, exuding an air of sophistication as he clinked glasses with the woman beside him. I recognized him instantly. It was Ryan Carter. Time had been unbelievably kind to him. At 60, Susan Carter wore a warm white chapeau that highlighted her slender waist. Her skin remained smooth, not a single wrinkle in sight, making her look no older than her early 40s. In contrast, my own reflection in the glass window told a completely different story. I had grown short and stocky, my head full of gray hair, my face weathered from years of hardship and exposure to the elements. Looking at Professor Carter and his wife, I finally understood the meaning of lifelong companionship and unwavering devotion. They were like a couple straight out of classical poetry. How envious I was, the way Susan looked at Ryan, her gaze overflowing with love. The people around them were full of admiration, but why was it Professor Carter? He was the man I had spent 40 years searching for. He was Ryan Carter, the boy I once knew as Ryan Collins. I stepped forward, walking onto the stage, and only when I grabbed his hand did I realize this was not a dream. Tears burned down my cheeks as I cried out, "Ryan, it's me, Emily Sanders. I've been searching for you for so long." The familiar yet distant eyes behind those gold-rimmed glasses flickered for a brief moment. Then, with a harsh motion, he forcefully shook off my hand and took 2 steps back, his brows furrowed tightly. "Who are you? I don't know you." That voice, it only confirmed what I already knew. Afraid I would lose him again, I shouted desperately, "It's me, Emily Sanders, Emily Lewis. We grew up together. We were betrothed as children. In the flood of '99, our village was destroyed, and we were separated by the raging waters. I've spent 40 years searching for you. Everyone told me you were dead." Tears blurred my vision as I choked out, "Ryan, you're alive." The entire hall fell into an eerie silence. All eyes were on me, watching the spectacle unfold, smirking with disdain. But the man I stared at so intently only looked at me with nothing but disgust. In that moment, I realized Ryan Carter didn't want to acknowledge me. Whispers filled the room. Did this old woman watch too many soap operas? She really thinks she can make up a story and claim some connection to Professor Carter? Professor Carter and his wife's love is something truly noble, and this cleaning lady thinks she has the right to call herself his childhood sweetheart. Just look at her. There's no way she could possibly know Professor Carter. What a joke. Then, a graceful voice chimed in. Like an elegant swan, Susan Carter spoke calmly. "Madam, you must be mistaken. My husband and I have never heard of an Emily Lewis. You've disrupted my birthday. If you don't leave now, don't blame us for taking legal action." Her voice, it was familiar. I knew it then. They were pretending. They just didn't want to be associated with me. Tears stung my eyes as I lifted my head and sneered. "Ryan, your parents passed away 3 years ago. Before they died, they still called out your name. Why didn't you return to the village, not even once? Just because you didn't want to marry me, you abandoned even your own parents? Are you even human?" For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed Ryan's face. He adjusted his glasses nervously, avoiding my gaze, before snapping. "I told you, you have the wrong person. My last name is Carter." The middle-aged man who bore an uncanny resemblance to him shoved me to the ground. "My father would never associate with someone like you. Security. Get her out of here." Even the child in his arms took the opportunity to spit on my face. For decades, I had dedicated my life to searching for Ryan Collins. I had cared for his parents, given up everything, all because of a childhood promise of marriage. Yet Ryan had survived the flood, changed his name, and never returned. He had built a new life, married Susan Carter, achieved success, and raised a family. I refused to accept it. The day after I was thrown out of the hotel, I printed thousands of flyers and made my 40-year-long search public. Ryan Carter and Susan Carter, afraid of the growing public attention, found me in private, wanting to settle things quietly. They placed several stacks of cash on the coffee table. Susan lifted her chin. 500,000. That should be enough for you to retire on. Ryan furrowed his brows slightly, sitting beside her, holding her hand. I stared blankly. So my 40 years were worth just 500,000? Not enough? Susan scoffed. Think about it, you're a rural woman. Do you think you could ever make this much money in your lifetime? She tightened her grip on Ryan's arm. Ryan and I have already been more than generous. Seeing that I wasn't responding, Ryan grew impatient and stomped his foot. It's all in the past. What more do you want? Suddenly I felt like laughing. I lifted my eyes to look at this old man, now graying with age. Back then, when you let go of my hand in the flood, it was to save Susan, wasn't it? Ryan didn't even flinch. You knew how to swim, Susan didn't. What else is there to say? But how could he possibly understand? How could he know the guilt that had tormented me for 40 years as I struggled in those raging waters? How I had spent decades believing it was my fault. How countless nights I woke up in terror, haunted by the image of him being swallowed by the flood. And yet, to him, there was nothing more to say. I clenched my fists, lowering my head. My voice trembled as I asked, "What about your parents, then? At least they were innocent." Ryan let out a cold laugh. Innocent? They tried to force me to marry you. How is that innocent? There wasn't the slightest hint of guilt on his face. Let me tell you something, Emily, he said, his tone full of disdain. I am free. Parents who ignored my wishes weren't worth keeping. And you've seen it yourself, I did nothing wrong. Without you people holding me back, I achieved greatness. If I had actually married you back then, instead of Susan, who knows where I'd be now? Probably rotting away in some mountain village, full of regret. The more he spoke, the more agitated he became, as if he were the one who had suffered all these years. Susan let out a light laugh. Just take the money and go. I didn't take it. I was afraid that if I did, they would turn around and accuse me of extortion. I left their villa and continued handing out flyers, contacting the media. I wanted to spend the rest of my life exposing their cruelty to the world. But before I could witness their downfall, my body finally gave out. I collapsed on the bridge spanning the river and never stood up again. Ryan Carter and Susan Carter remained a celebrated couple in the eyes of the world. And I was nothing more than a cleaning lady who had caused a scene at a high society banquet, a fleeting figure in short viral videos. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in my childhood home. The old, familiar single-story house. You two are betrothed. Why shouldn't you sleep together? If you ask me, you should just get it over with, so the Carter family can send over the betrothal gifts. The coarse voice startled me. I turned and saw my father downing another cup of liquor. Stop eating and go meet him already. When I didn't move, my mother patted my hand. Your father is only thinking of what's best for you. If you don't keep an eye on Ryan, someone else will steal him away, she warned. It was only then that I realized I had been reborn. You deaf or something? My father barked. Normally you can't stop talking about Ryan, and now you're acting all shy? I slammed my bowl down onto the table. Dad, Mom, I'm not marrying him. My mother's eyes widened. My younger brother dropped his chopsticks. The next second, my father's hand swung toward me. I dodged just in time. What nonsense are you spouting? What's wrong with you today? My mother asked, full of worry. My little brother smirked, biting into a steamed bun. So, you finally realized Ryan would never be interested in you? I thought you'd never understand. Yeah, why hadn't I understood back then? Why did I have to pour my heart out for someone who was never worth it? In my past life, under my family's pressure, I braved the freezing cold to visit the Carter family. Ryan Carter's parents were kind to me, warmly holding my hands and inviting me in for dinner. But Ryan himself only looked at me with a cold expression, pulling me outside the door. Running to a man's house at night who doesn't know what you're thinking? You're that desperate? I lowered my head, stammering. My dad kicked me out. He said that if I don't stay at your house for the night, he won't let me back home. Of course, Ryan didn't believe me. He scoffed and ordered, I already said I'd marry you. What's your hurry? Go home. With a loud bang, he turned and bolted the door. I didn't even notice the blatant disgust on his face. I was too busy feeling overjoyed by his promise that he would marry me. Snow fell heavily that night. Afraid of being beaten when I got home, I sat outside his door for hours, my body slowly freezing in the cold. Only when it was well past midnight did I finally drag my numb legs back home. The moment I pushed the door open, my father noticed. He slapped me several times, cursing me for being useless, but even as I endured his blows, my heart was warm, because Ryan Carter had said he would marry me. How foolish. But this time, I wouldn't let myself suffer in the cold. I wouldn't let myself get beaten. I wouldn't even go to see him. No matter what, I would never marry him. With that, I grabbed 2 steamed buns and slipped into my room. The small, cramped space was filled with traces of Ryan. His discarded calligraphy practice sheets were taped to the walls, his broken fountain pen sat on my desk, along with an old pencil case he had thrown away. I had carefully collected everything related to him, treasuring them like priceless relics. But when I thought about how my past life had ended, everything before me suddenly felt disgusting. Without hesitation, I threw every last thing of his into the trash. This time around, I wanted nothing to do with him. The next morning, my mother, Lisa Zhao, stuffed 2 boiled eggs into my hands. These are from Ryan. Looking at the eggs, memories from my past life flooded back. No matter the season, I would always carry warm eggs in my pocket, racing to school to place them in Ryan Carter's drawer. One day, he had come to my desk, hesitating. "Emily, 1 egg isn't enough for me." I had understood. He was a growing boy. So from that day on, I gave him both of my eggs. I had never imagined that while I went hungry every morning, Ryan Carter had been offering my breakfast to Susan. When I confronted him, demanding an explanation, he acted like he had done nothing wrong. "You already know Susan's family struggles financially. What's wrong with helping a classmate?" Then, with a disappointed sigh, he said, "I didn't think you'd be this petty. What, are you going to ration my meals after we get married too?" His words made me feel guilty. And when he mentioned marriage, I blushed uncontrollably. With just a few words, he had fooled me into continuing to give up my breakfast for him. How stupid I had been. "Mom, 1 egg is enough," I said flatly. "What, you're not eating today?" she asked, surprised. Before she could say another word, I peeled the egg and shoved it into my mouth, swallowing it down in a few bites. Under her stunned gaze, I grabbed my things and left for school. Ryan Carter arrived a few minutes after I did. He wore a black coat, brushed the snow off his shoulders, and adjusted his round glasses with a composed expression. His tall, upright figure and scholarly demeanor made him stand out from the rest of us. He never quite fit in with our small village. He reached into his drawer to feel around, but after a moment, his hand froze. He searched more carefully, but it was empty. Clearly unwilling to believe it, he bent down and checked again. Still nothing. He abruptly turned his head to look at me, but I was busy memorizing vocabulary, pretending not to notice. Just then, Susan walked into the classroom, her head lowered. She wore a clean, floral-patterned cotton jacket, her dark hair braided into 2 neat plaits. Unlike the rest of us, whose faces were flushed red from the biting cold, her skin was radiant and soft, like a ripe peach. Her delicate hands made it clear she had never done a single chore in her life. I remembered how Ryan Carter always claimed he was pitiful. But looking at him now, I couldn't see what was so pitiful about him. Sure, he only had his mother, but she doted on him endlessly, never letting him do a single chore. Meanwhile, I had been herding cattle, cutting grass for the pigs, and hauling water from the well since I was a child. And when there was nothing else to do, my father would slap me around just to vent his frustration. My hands were rough like sandpaper. If anyone was pitiful, shouldn't it have been me? But Ryan Carter had never once cared. It wasn't that he didn't see it. He just didn't care. Susan clutched the straps of her school bag as she stumbled over to Ryan's desk. Normally, at this time, he would hand her the egg I gave him. But today, there was nothing. Ryan glanced at her apologetically. It was then that he noticed her pale lips, the way she swayed unsteadily. He realized she was having her period. "Sit down and drink some of my warm water," he said gently. "Wait here, I'll be right back." I heard everything. The next thing I knew, Ryan was standing right in front of my desk, looking anxious. "Emily, where's my egg?" "There isn't one. There won't be any more." I kept my eyes on my book. Ryan grew agitated. Emily, don't play around. I just need my share today. Without waiting for an answer, he reached straight into my school bag and started rummaging through it. I was so furious I nearly exploded. I yanked my bag back and held it tightly in my arms. I said no, do you not understand? My voice was so loud that the whole class turned to look at us. Ryan awkwardly adjusted his glasses. It's just an egg. Why are you making such a big deal out of it? If you don't have one, then fine. I laughed. You and Susan have been together for 156 days. 2 eggs a day. That means you've eaten 312 of my eggs. I couldn't hold back my anger anymore and shouted, "Pay me back. Give me my money." Ryan's eyes widened. He had never imagined I would say something like that to him. Emily, are you crazy? I grabbed him by the collar and turned to Susan. You two shameless people, pay me back right now. Tears welled up in Susan's eyes. She covered her face and sobbed at her desk. The classroom buzzed with whispers. I'd feel bad if I ate even 1 egg from someone, but he's eaten over 100, and she's the one crying. They're already struggling financially, and yet they had the nerve to take food from her. I knew something was off about those two. I can't believe Emily Sanders put up with this for so long. If it were me, I would have lost it ages ago. The murmurs grew louder and louder. Suddenly, Susan shot to her feet, tears streaming down her face. I never begged Emily to give me eggs, she shouted. She glared at me hatefully and pointed a trembling finger. Ask him yourselves, have I ever forced him? He knew my family was struggling and offered to help on his own. And now he regrets it, so he wants to ruin my reputation? How are Ryan and I supposed to face everyone after this? I had underestimated how shameless Susan could be. If she dared to twist the truth like this, then fine. I raised my voice and shouted, yeah, I regret it. So what? Pay me back. Give me my money. I pushed my chair back, making a loud screeching noise. Susan flinched and stepped back in fear. Someone whistled from the crowd. Whoa, the wife and the mistress are fighting. Who's his wife? I would never marry him. I snapped, glaring in their direction. Ryan grabbed my wrist, gripping it tightly, afraid I would actually charge at Susan. Emily Sanders, have you not embarrassed yourself enough? He hissed. You're making such a huge scene over a few eggs. Fine. You want money? I'll pay you back, Ryan Carter said, shoving my arm away. This has nothing to do with Susan. You forced those eggs on me. I never owed you anything. Pain shot through my arm, but I refused to back down. I met his gaze head-on, a bitter sadness rising in my chest. There was a time when he would stand up for me when I was wronged, when he would take care of me anxiously if I was sick. But after Susan appeared, everything changed. I finally understood he was no longer the person I once knew. Ryan Carter, I hate you. I will never marry you. Tears fell silently down my face. Seeing me cry, Susan immediately burst into louder sobs. Ryan, who had just started to soften, grew cold again. He pulled back the hand he had reached toward me, curling his lips in disdain. Good. That's exactly what I wanted. Then he turned and hurried to Susan's side, crouching by her desk and comforting her in a soft voice. The next morning, Ryan slammed a few bills onto my desk. Without looking up, I took the money and stuffed it away. From that moment on, I never followed him around like I used to. Ryan spent nearly every day glued to Susan, whether it was during class, in between periods, or on the way to and from school. But sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I caught him watching me, as if he was waiting for me to change my mind. But this was an era where knowledge could change your fate. No matter how noisy the world around me was, I poured all my energy into studying. In my past life, I never had the chance to change my destiny. I made it to my senior year of high school, and my grades were decent. But my father said, girls who study too much become too opinionated. They start competing with men for power. Once you marry Ryan, are you planning to argue with him every day? You should drop out sooner rather than later. That way, we can save some money for your little brother. I refused to accept it. I went to Ryan, hoping he would support me. At the time, he was practicing calligraphy. He barely lifted his eyes, uninterested in a decision that could change my entire future. Isn't your biggest dream to be a good wife and mother, to spend your life by my side? He said indifferently. What's the point of studying? I didn't hear the mockery in his tone. My face flushed and I stammered, I never said that. But the excitement of being noticed by him drowned out my unwillingness. So in my senior year, I dropped out. Even my homeroom teacher tried to talk me out of it. You have the potential to get into a great university, he said. Don't give up on yourself. But I only smiled and replied, Teacher, for a village girl like me, making it to high school is already more than enough. After that, I stayed home, working on the farm and patiently waiting for Ryan Carter to marry me. But in the end, a flood tore our lives apart, and I wasted 40 years of my youth for him. I gave him my entire life, while he built a new one with Susan, surrounded by children and grandchildren, enjoying the warmth of a family. Now that I had been reborn, I made up my mind I would go to college. And I would never have anything to do with Ryan Carter again. I did well in most subjects, but math was my weakness. So after every class, I stayed behind to ask my teacher for help, filling my notebook with pages and pages of notes. I never imagined that something I treasured so much would be destroyed by Susan. That day, after lunch at home, I rushed back to school without resting. On the way, I ran into Ryan. At the entrance of the alley, our eyes met. He crossed his arms and let out a cold laugh. I thought you hated me? Couldn't even hold out for a few days before coming to find me, huh? I ignored him, quickening my pace to widen the distance between us. I just wanted to get to the classroom as soon as possible and organize my notes. We walked in silence all the way to the classroom door. Just as I reached it, Ryan Carter suddenly strode forward and grabbed my arm. Emily Sanders, let me tell you something. You can keep up this act all you want, but my patience has limits. When the engagement is called off, don't come crying to me. I lifted my head and calmly met his gaze. I already told my parents I was the one who called off the engagement, not you. Ryan's expression stiffened. For the first time, I saw genuine disbelief on his face. But a second later, he sneered. Your parents are just as stubborn as you. So what if you said it? Ryan didn't believe I had truly given up on him. But that didn't matter anymore. In 6 months, I would take the college entrance exam, leave this place, and be rid of him forever. Let go, I said, forcefully pulling my arm free. I pushed open the door and walked into the classroom, only to be met with the sight of Susan, standing in front of the trash can, holding my notebook in her hands, ripping it to shreds page by page. In an instant, rage boiled through my veins. I lunged forward, yanking her braided hair and throwing her to the ground. But it was too late. The notebook I had treasured, the one filled with all my study notes, was already in pieces, soaking in the dirty water of the trash can. Emily Sanders, what are you doing? Susan shrieked, scrambling to her feet and swinging her fists at me. I kicked her back down. Years of farm work had made me strong. Susan had no way to fight back. Why did you touch my notebook? I demanded, slapping her hard across the face. Suddenly, a powerful force struck me from behind. An arm wrapped around my throat, yanking me away and tossing me aside. My forehead slammed into the edge of a desk, splitting open and bleeding. Dazed, I looked up, only to see Ryan Carter shielding Susan in his arms. The sound of Susan's sobs made his eyes burn with fury. Emily Sanders, have you lost your mind? It's just a notebook. Was that worth beating someone up over? At that moment, a memory flashed through my mind. Ryan, when we were little, standing in front of me with his arms spread wide, shielding me from a group of older boys. Back then, he had been small, just slightly taller than me, wearing a thick cotton jacket. Clenching his tiny fists, he had shouted in his high-pitched voice, "No one is allowed to bully Emily. If you do, I'll beat you up." He had grown up with his whole heart set on me. But the person who once promised forever had changed so easily. I bit my lip hard, tears streaming down my face. Ryan finally noticed the wound on my forehead and was about to speak when Susan suddenly wailed, "I didn't know it was Emily's notebook. I saw it on the floor and thought it was trash. I swear I didn't know." Maybe Ryan felt a little guilty toward me, but I would never compare to Susan. He gently checked her for injuries, seeing a faint scratch near her ear, and immediately became furious. "Emily, you haul water and shovel manure every day. You don't know your own strength. What if you left a scar? Could you take responsibility for that?" He punched the desk beside him. "How could someone like you ever be a match for me?" The tears had cleansed my anger. Looking at Ryan's expression, full of disappointment, like I had failed him, I wiped my face dry and met his gaze head-on. It's not me who isn't worthy of you, Ryan Carter. It's you who isn't worthy of me. Ryan's head snapped up, disbelief flashing in his eyes. My torn notebook could never be salvaged. From that day on, I never spoke to him again. Whenever we passed each other in the hallways, I kept my head down, treating him like a stranger. Several times, he waited for me on the way home, as if wanting to say something. But I always walked past him without a glance, making him so furious that he shouted behind me, "Fine, Emily Sanders. If you're so good at pretending, keep it up for the rest of your life." When my homeroom teacher found out about the destroyed notebook, he pulled me aside between classes. He patted my arm and said, "Emily, the college entrance exam is in just a few months. You have to focus on your studies. Don't waste your time on these petty things." I smiled. "Don't worry, sir. I won't let trashy people or their drama distract me." The teacher nodded and sighed. "When you wanted to drop out before, I tried so many times to talk you out of it, but you never listened. I lost sleep over it, wondering why a girl with your potential would throw away her future. So, what made you change your mind?" Instead of dwelling on the past, I focused on the fact that I would be leaving this place to see a much bigger world. Unlike me, who devoted every waking moment to studying, Ryan Carter and Susan grew closer by the day. They spent all their free time together doing homework side by side, laughing and teasing each other. Behind my back, people whispered that in the end, the first wife had been cast aside. But I knew Ryan too well. He wasn't just getting close to Susan. He was deliberately watching my reaction, waiting for me to break down, to revert to the pathetic girl who used to trail behind him like a shadow. He didn't need to bother. At this point, even if they kissed in the middle of the classroom, I wouldn't feel a thing. Ryan Carter no longer mattered to me. I truly wanted nothing to do with him. But life never went the way I wanted. A month later, I saw him again at his coming-of-age ceremony. I hadn't planned to go. In my past life, that day had left me utterly humiliated. Back then, I had started preparing for his coming-of-age gift months in advance. Every night, after finishing farm work and homework, I would sit under the dim light and knit him a sweater. It took me 5 months, knitting, unraveling, and re-knitting, until it was finally perfect. At the banquet, the villagers teased that since we were both adults now, we should be married the following year. Sitting across from me, Ryan's handsome face made me blush, and I instinctively lowered my head, my ears burning. Susan, furious, stomped her foot and ran out of the banquet hall. Ryan saw the whole thing. Then, in front of everyone, he suddenly exploded. He grabbed the sweater I had made for him and flung it onto the table. The steaming soup spilled over it, staining the once pristine white wool yellow. The alcohol burner nearby caught the edge of the fabric, and in an instant, the sweater went up in flames. His fists clenched, his eyes burning with rage as he glared at me. "I hate white the most," he snapped before storming off to chase after Susan. After that night, the entire village was filled with rumors about my disgrace. How could I willingly walk into that same humiliation again? But I never expected that my parents would secretly take the sweater I had knitted and bring it to the banquet as an apology gift. I couldn't let them give it to him. Never. I bolted out of the house, running as fast as I could. At the village's largest restaurant, the banquet was already in full swing. Just like before, long tables were lined up, packed with villagers eating and drinking. At the center of the main table sat Ryan Carter. His eyes scanned the crowd, his expression tense, until he spotted me. The moment he saw me, his shoulders relaxed and he lowered his head, pouring himself a drink. As I stepped closer, his smirk deepened. My father pulled the white sweater from the bag and presented it to Ryan as if it were a rare treasure. "Look at this. My daughter spent over 5 months knitting this. Her hands are full of calluses because of it." Ryan's mother beamed with delight. "Emily really knows how to take care of people. I can't wait for her to officially join the family." My mother laughed along. "About everything that was said before, Mr. and Mrs. Carter, especially you, Ryan, please don't take it to heart. Young couples always have their little fights. It's normal." My father quickly chimed in. "Exactly. And I've read Emily's diaries from when she was little. Every single wish she wrote was about marrying Ryan." Ryan sat there holding the sweater, an amused smirk tugging at his lips. I never took her words seriously. His tone was indifferent, but his eyes carried a hint of satisfaction. "Emily, you're finally here," Ryan's father called out to me. "Your parents said you had a fever. I thought you wouldn't come." I stood there, my gaze locked onto Ryan. I reached out and grabbed the sweater. Ryan's brows furrowed, as if he hadn't heard me correctly. I didn't say another word. I simply tried to yank it from his hands. But my mother grabbed my arm, stopping me. Ryan, startled, clutched the sweater tightly and took a step back. "Emily, what are you doing in front of everyone?" he demanded. My father shoved me aside. "A gift given cannot be taken back." All eyes turned to me. "This is mine," I said, my voice unwavering. "I'm not giving it to him." "You spent months knitting this sweater for Ryan. Do you think I wouldn't know?" My mother's face was cold. "It's mine," I said firmly. Ignoring her attempts to stop me, I pushed through the crowd and yanked the sweater from Ryan's hands. He stood frozen, staring at his now empty hands. My father, furious, raised his hand to hit me. I slapped his arm away and, in front of everyone, shouted, "Mom, Dad, I don't like Ryan Carter anymore, not even a little." I turned to the village chief. "Mr. Zhou, I want you to be my witness. Our childhood engagement is officially over." The once lively banquet fell into complete silence. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone stand up, Susan. She was looking at Ryan, her face filled with excitement, pure joy lighting up her expression. Just moments ago, my mother had been crying and calling me foolish. But now, she rolled up her sleeves and stormed toward Susan. "You shameless little brat. Did you think I was deaf? Do you think I haven't heard the rumors? You disgraceful little thing." Ryan and Emily were always meant for each other. She swung at Susan's face. Susan's mother, enraged, lunged at my mother, and within seconds the two women were locked in a vicious brawl. My father, seeing the chaos, rushed to join in. Susan shrank back, trembling, as plates and bowls flew crashing onto her coat. Ryan stepped forward, pushing through the crowd. At first, Susan had been sobbing, but the moment she saw him, she straightened up like she had found her savior. She glanced at me, her fear quickly turning into smug triumph, as if to say, "I won." "Yes, Ryan, go to her. Right here, in front of the whole village, hold her tightly in your arms. Let this finally be over." But what I never expected was for Ryan to stop in front of me. His bloodshot eyes locked onto mine and his hands trembled as he grabbed my wrists. "Emily, why don't you like me anymore?" I pulled my hands away. "Because you don't deserve me." Laughter erupted from the crowd. My father roared, "What a joke. Ryan being willing to marry you is a blessing from our ancestors. How could he not deserve you?" I didn't waver. I looked Ryan straight in the eyes. "You just don't deserve me." His chest rose and fell violently, as if there were a million things he wanted to say. But in the end, he simply let out a cold scoff, downed a cup of white liquor, and then smashed the glass onto the ground. "Fine, the engagement is off. Emily Sanders, I don't need you." With that, he turned and walked away from the banquet. Susan, stunned, called out to him a few times, but he never looked back. Watching his figure disappear, I felt a sense of freedom unlike anything I had ever experienced. This time, it was truly over. I was free. Unlike in my past life, after the banquet, it was Susan and her mother who lost their standing in the village. People gossiped that ever since Susan's mother became a widow, she had been restless. And now her daughter was following in her footsteps, trying to ruin my engagement. Ryan's parents, knowing my feelings, spent the entire night trying to change my mind. "Ryan has always put you first," his mother pleaded. "Maybe he's been a little distant, but that's all because of Susan." Everyone tried to convince me, as if my life would be ruined without Ryan Carter. I knew there was no reasoning with them, so I simply kept quiet. As long as I got into college, I could leave this place forever. Though the village was filled with gossip, Susan didn't seem to care. Now that my engagement with Ryan was broken, she no longer had to hold back. In the classroom, she openly wrapped her arms around his waist, pouted at him, and pinched his face while sweetly calling his name, proudly declaring to everyone that Ryan Carter was her boyfriend. Ryan said nothing. He didn't resist. He just silently accepted it. This should have been a big deal. Ryan Carter should have blushed with excitement, lifted Susan into his arms, and spun her around in joy. He should have taken her home, stood in front of his parents to shield her from their scolding, and defended their love. But his reaction was lukewarm. What was even more surprising was that after they got together, Instead of becoming happier, their relationship was filled with growing tension. In my past life, Ryan only sought out Susan after he had become successful. With money, all problems could be smoothed over. But in this life, they were together when he had nothing. When poverty enters the door, love flies out the window. Susan resented that Ryan's parents were poor farmers, unlike her best friend's family who had gone into business and now owned several companies. She also resented Ryan for being emotionally distant. Her best friend's boyfriend was charming and affectionate, while Ryan, after winning her over, had become as cold as stone. As the new year approached, they had a huge fight in class. Susan wanted Ryan to go to town with her to buy new clothes for the holiday, but he refused, saying finals were coming up and studying was more important. No matter how much she begged, he wouldn't go. In a fit of rage, Susan screamed at him in front of the whole class, pounding her fists against his chest. Then, she started comparing him to her best friend's boyfriend, saying how thoughtful and caring he was. Ryan, furious, shoved her back against the wall. If you like him so much, then go be with him. Every day, they were like characters in a dramatic soap opera. The class was thoroughly entertained, gathering around to watch and laughing at their fights. Susan, as usual, ended up sobbing at her desk. Ryan, irritated, packed his bag and walked out of the classroom. That was the first time he had ever skipped class. As he walked down the hallway, we passed each other. He stopped, in a voice filled with frustration, called my name. I didn't look back. When the final exam results came out, Ryan, who had always ranked first in the school, had completely flunked. He had dropped out of the top 30. Meanwhile, I had climbed to 10th place. Holding my report card, I ran home excitedly, eager to prove to my family that my hard work had paid off. But my father wasn't happy. Instead, he threatened me. Go apologize to Ryan and tell the Carter family to finalize the engagement immediately. Otherwise, don't expect me to pay your tuition next semester. I slammed my chopsticks on the table. I've told you 1,000 times, I'm not marrying Ryan Carter. My father lost it. He grabbed a shovel from behind the door and pressed the cold metal against my throat. You think you're something special now, huh? Ranking 10th in the school makes you feel powerful? You think anyone else would marry you if you don't marry Ryan? Answer me. Are you going to marry him or not? My mother sobbed in the background, trying to pull him away. My younger brother continued eating, completely indifferent. This was how I had lived my whole life. Everything good had always gone to my brother, while I was treated like a piece of furniture. Only noticed when someone needed to take their anger out. All the resentment, all the humiliation I had buried inside me for years exploded in that moment. You think just because you're my father, I won't hold a grudge? I screamed. My father's eyes widened in disbelief. You ungrateful brat, how dare you talk to me like that? Why should I respect someone who treats me worse than an animal? My voice was shaking, but I refused to let a single tear fall. I will keep studying. Even if I have to sell my blood to pay for it, I will. Word of the fight reached the Carter family. The next morning, as I wandered through the snow, torn between getting a part-time job in town or borrowing money from my homeroom teacher, someone suddenly grabbed me from behind. Before I could scream, I heard Ryan's voice in my ear. Emily, please, don't sell your blood, that's dangerous. He held me tightly, his body trembling, as if afraid that if he let go, I would actually go through with it. For a moment, I stood frozen. Then I pried his hands off me. My life has nothing to do with you. I turned to leave the moment I finished speaking, but Ryan Carter wouldn't let it go. He grabbed my wrist and shoved a bundle of paper bills into my hands. Emily, I'll pay for your tuition, he said earnestly. His voice was a little tense as he averted his gaze. I broke up with Susan. I've been thinking a lot these past few weeks. Emily, I was wrong. I finally realized that Susan was never worth it. His voice became almost a whisper. So let's go back to how things were, okay? When we fill out our college applications, let's pick the same school. No matter where you go, I'll go with you. And as soon as we graduate, we'll get married. Why was Ryan still holding on to these delusions? I shook off his hand. And what if Susan was worth it? Ryan's eyes widened slightly, not understanding what I meant. You only realized Susan wasn't what you expected after you got together with her. But what if she had been exactly what you wanted? What if she had been your perfect dream girl, gentle, selfless, willing to sacrifice everything for you? If that had been the case, would you still be standing here today? I smiled, my voice eerily calm. If I had sold my blood to pay for school, would you have even cared? Or would you have just read about it in the newspaper and moved on like it was just another tragic story? Ryan remained silent. I knew him too well. You think I was joking when I said you don't deserve me, don't you? My tone was light, almost amused. But I wasn't joking. You really don't deserve me. When I loved you, I was willing to give you both of my eggs without hesitation. But if the roles were reversed, no matter if it was me or Susan, you would have only been willing to spare just one. That's the difference between us. You're selfish, Ryan. You don't know how to love. I buried my face in my scarf, stepping back. Don't come looking for me again. It's disgusting. That day, Ryan stood in the snow for a long, long time. In the end, it was his parents who came and dragged him back home. Even so, I couldn't bring myself to borrow money from my homeroom teacher. I decided to take on a winter job first. If that wasn't enough, then I would consider asking for help. That night, my mother pushed open my bedroom door. She placed a small box in my hands. I may not be capable, she said, her voice quiet, but no matter what, I will find a way to pay for your tuition. Under the dim light, she patted my hand. It was only then that I noticed how rough and calloused her fingers had become, as coarse as sandpaper. It wasn't just me. My mother had suffered too. I threw my arms around her, suppressing my sobs as I swore, "Mom, I will get into college, and I will give you a better life." That winter break, I didn't allow myself a moment of rest. I studied until I lost track of time, drowning in textbooks and practice exams. Before I knew it, school had started again. The classroom seating had been rearranged, and I was placed even closer to the front. Ryan sat diagonally ahead of me, just a few seats away. He turned back to glance at me, his expression a mix of guilt and relief. I turned away, refusing to acknowledge him. Nothing, not him, not anyone, could shake my determination to get into college. But suddenly, I felt a sharp tug on my scalp. Susan had grabbed a fistful of my hair. "Copycat. Ryan would never like someone like you," she sneered. "What are you trying to do? Seduce him again? Don't even think about it. You and I are nothing alike. Even if you mimic me your whole life, you'll never be as good as me." I turned my head and saw that Susan was wearing an orange-red coat, the exact same color as mine. So that's what she was mad about? I had no interest in wasting my breath explaining. Instead, I twisted her arm and kicked her to the ground. Susan never fought back. Her go-to move was always playing the victim. She curled up on the floor, sobbing dramatically. "Ryan, help me. I'm scared. She's going to kill me." The whole class erupted into excited chatter, cheering as if watching a live drama unfold. But Ryan suddenly rushed forward, standing protectively in front of me. He reached out, carefully brushing my disheveled hair aside, his face full of concern. "Emily, are you hurt?" I stepped back instantly. "Don't touch me." Hearing the commotion, Susan quickly scrambled to her feet and threw her arms around Ryan from behind, clinging to him. "You told me yourself that Emily was nothing but a low-class country girl who could never compare to me," she cried. "So what's wrong with you now? I'm prettier than her. I'm more well-mannered than her. Why are you treating me like this?" "I'm the one who's truly meant for you, Ryan. Please don't break up with me." Susan's desperate plea hung in the air. But Ryan Carter's face darkened instantly. He forcefully shook off Susan's grip and snapped. "Emily and I had a childhood engagement. We were always supposed to be together. You were the one who interfered. How dare you turn this around and blame me?" Tears welled up in Susan's eyes as she stood frozen in disbelief. I calmly tied my braid, then looked at her and warned coldly, "Try provoking me again, and next time I'll show you just how tough a country girl can be." After that day, Susan finally quieted down, at least a little. But she still clung to Ryan, hoping he would change his mind. Ryan, however, rejected her again and again. At some point, his eyes stopped following her, and instead, they only followed me. As summer arrived, so did the college entrance exam. In my past life, I had never taken this test. So this time, everything felt new to me. But I wasn't nervous. I knew I was prepared. Sure enough, when the test began, I wrote non-stop, filling the pages with confidence. When the results were posted, I had scored 636. I ranked second in the entire school and eighth in the whole county. My homeroom teacher was so thrilled that he personally came to my house, assuring me I didn't need to worry about tuition, there would be village donations to support me. Seeing the respect I was now receiving, my father finally stopped yelling at me. As for Ryan, he had been too distracted by Susan's constant drama and performed terribly. He barely scored above 500. Susan, who had never cared about academics, didn't even reach 300. One day Ryan's parents came to visit, sitting in our home and chatting as if nothing had changed. They sighed about how Susan had ruined Ryan's studies, and then turned to look at me. Ryan's mother wiped her tears. I always said Emily was the best choice. I simply smiled, said nothing, and excused myself from the room. On the day we went to submit our college applications, Ryan stood in the hallway, looking lost. When he saw that I was going too, he followed behind me, his voice hesitant. Emily, which university are you applying to? That's none of your business. Ryan nearly pleaded. Just tell me. I know we can't go to the same school anymore, but I want to at least be in the same city as you. I turned back to look at him. Where do you want to go? Ryan's eyes lit up instantly. Beijing. I want to go to Beijing. Got it, I replied. I'm not going to Beijing. Ryan stood there, stunned, his eyes turning red. Emily, do you really hate me that much? His voice was filled with disbelief. Before, no matter what I did, you would always forgive me. Now I know I was wrong. I'll never hurt you again. So why? Why won't you forgive me? For a brief moment, I wanted to tell him, I don't hate you, I just don't care anymore, but I didn't say anything. I didn't even look back. For someone who no longer mattered, ignoring him was enough. After submitting my college application, I waited at home for the acceptance letter. Then the heavy rains began. Day after day, the storms grew worse. As I marked off the dates on my calendar, I felt a creeping sense of unease. This was the same time in my past life when the flood destroyed our village. Every year, our village experienced a few major storms. No one took them seriously. Not then. Not now. I told my parents, this rain isn't normal, we need to leave. They brushed me off. You're just anxious about your acceptance letter. Stop worrying over nothing. It rains like this every year. I didn't dare waste any more time. That night, I grabbed an umbrella and ran through the downpour to find my homeroom teacher. He was the only person who had ever believed in me. With his support, we convinced the village chief to contact the dam workers upstream. The response wasn't reassuring. The water levels are rising faster than usual, they admitted, but we can't say for sure if it'll lead to a flood. I couldn't hold back anymore. Mr. Zhao, we can't afford to take that risk. We should evacuate now, just to be safe. If nothing happens, we can always come back, but if something does happen, it'll be too late. The village chief's face hardened. Then he slammed his palm on the table and stood up. You're right, we can't afford to gamble with our lives. I'll start mobilizing the villagers immediately. That night, the entire village lit up with activity. People packed up what they could and started moving toward the higher ground in town. Ryan walked at the back with his parents. Some villagers, seeing me at the front, started grumbling loudly. The village chief is really taking orders from a little girl now? This rain is going to stop any minute. Why the hell are we running like cowards? The young man still wanted to mock me, but Ryan Carter picked up a bamboo pole and struck the ground in front of his rubber shoes. His voice was cold. Since you think the rain is about to stop, why don't you stay behind? Faced with this direct challenge, the man's face turned bright red with embarrassment. Of course, he wasn't brave enough to stay in the village alone. He quietly turned around and continued following the others toward higher ground. In truth, there were many others who shared his doubts. A significant number of villagers still chose to stay behind, including Susan and her mother. They stubbornly insisted that in all the decades of the village's existence, there had never been a major flood. This year would be no different. No matter how much the village chief tried to convince them, they refused to leave. But floods don't wait. When they come, no one can stop them. By the early morning of the next day, news spread that the village had been destroyed. Many people ran up to me and the village chief, thanking us repeatedly for saving their lives. On the third day, as the sun came out and the water level receded, The village chief organized a team to return and assess the damage. When Ryan saw that I was joining the group, he immediately raised his hand. We rowed our boat back to the village, but what we saw was heartbreaking. Collapsed mud houses, flooded courtyards, everything buried under layers of debris. Amidst the wreckage, Susan and her mother clung to a tree, their clothes soaked and covered in mud. The moment they saw us, they burst into desperate sobs. "Help us, please, save us." Susan's white nightgown had long been stained brown with dirt. The surrounding water was filled with floating debris, making it impossible for the boat to get close. Someone called out, "Emily, swim over there with 2 life rings." Without hesitation, I helped another villager onto the boat and then turned to dive into the water towards Susan. I never expected that in such a life-threatening moment, she would still try to harm me. Just as I reached her, Susan slapped the life ring out of my hand and pretended to lose consciousness, dramatically sinking into the water. But in the next second, she grabbed onto me and shoved me down, pressing my head underwater while screaming, "I can't swim, I'm so scared." Ryan was not far away. Susan didn't believe she was about to die. She was certain Ryan would come save her. I was a strong swimmer, but Susan clung to me like a drowning monkey, dragging me under. Mouthfuls of muddy water flooded into my lungs, my vision darkening. Ryan, who had seen everything, immediately let go of the boat's oar. He had never swum so fast in his life. He had never been so terrified. Susan, delighted, cried out, "Ryan, save me." But just then, a strong wave surged forward. Both Susan and I were swept away. The violent current carried floating debris, and just as a heavy wooden beam came crashing down toward me, an arm stretched out, blocking it. The sickening sound of bones snapping echoed through the water. Ryan wrapped himself around me, holding me tightly in his arms. Susan, clinging to a floating log in the distance, screamed for help, but Ryan didn't even look at her. He tightened his grip on me. A piece of steel rebar scraped across his back, slicing through flesh. A crimson mist bloomed in the murky water. I heard a muffled groan escape from his throat, but his arms never loosened. Eventually, we drifted downstream and washed up on the riverbank where we were rescued. As soon as I regained my senses, I rushed to check his injuries. Seeing my anxious expression, Ryan, pale-faced and weak, suddenly smiled. He reached out, gently cupping my face, his voice trembling. "Emily, can you call me Ryan again? Just once?" I froze. In my past life, I couldn't bear to see him hurt, but now his suffering only felt ironic. "Ryan Carter, do you think this makes up for everything?" I spoke coldly. "I won't be moved by this, and I will not get back together with you." "How many times do I have to say it? We were over a long time ago." The light in his eyes shattered completely. As the floodwaters receded, the village began rebuilding. This time, there were no casualties. For the first time, I could finally breathe in relief. Word spread quickly about what Susan had done. The villagers, seeing me as their savior, turned their backs on her family. Ryan's parents, knowing that their son had saved me, once again came to propose marriage, hoping to use this life-saving debt to bring us back together. Of course I refused, but before I could even speak, Ryan was the one who stopped them. His arm, now in a cast, rested on his lap as he looked at his parents. "Mom, Dad, stop forcing Emily." He turned to me, his expression filled with rare determination. "I don't deserve her." His voice was quiet but firm. Then he met my eyes. "But Emily, please wait for me. I promise I'll work hard to catch up to you. One day, I'll be good enough for you again." That day, Ryan left behind a piece of calligraphy. It was a poem, one I had once loved when I was deeply in love with him. Back then, no matter how much I begged, he had never given me a single word of his handwriting. Now, when I no longer loved him, he finally gave it to me. He actually gave it to me willingly. On the thin rice paper, the ink spread beautifully, forming the words, "Spring banquet, a cup of green wine, a song sung again. I bow thrice with 3 wishes. 1, may my beloved live 1,000 years. 2, may I always see him. 3, may we be like the swallows on the beams, meeting year after year." But what was the point of seeing him again? I crumpled the paper into a ball and threw it into the trash. At last, I left the village and moved to the city to begin my college life. I majored in computer science, one of the hottest fields in the early 21st century. With memories from my past life, I worked tirelessly to stay ahead of the curve. While in college, I sold CDs and worked as a computer tutor. Later, I started a small training center. Once I had saved enough money, I immediately took out a military loan and bought an apartment, fulfilling the promise I had once made to my mother. Money was truly a powerful thing. With financial independence, my father no longer dared to say a single harsh word to me. Even my usually indifferent younger brother learned to read the room, treating me with respect and caution. From the moment I enrolled, Ryan Carter kept looking for me whenever he had time. Sometimes, he just watched me from afar. Other times, he would approach, speaking as if he were in a one-man play, updating me on his life. I found it annoying and told him to get lost. Then one day, a boy appeared by my side. He was completely different from Ryan, never aloof, never pretending to be superior. He would give me everything he had if he could. For the first time, Ryan, who had remained calm until now, completely lost control. He grabbed my shoulders and shook me violently. "Emily, why didn't you wait for me? I've been trying so hard to be worthy of you. Why do you pretend not to see me?" I clenched my fists, forcing down my irritation. "Why should I care about you?" I snapped. "Get lost. Stop interfering in my life." Ryan shook his head in disbelief. The next second, Quinn, the boy beside me, grabbed him and pinned him to the ground. "If anyone here is pretending, it's you, Ryan," Quinn said coldly. "Emily hates you. You're the one who's been acting blind all this time." Then he turned to me, his voice softer. "Emily, go back to your dorm. I'll take care of this." I nodded and quickly left. Behind me, Ryan screamed, "Emily, don't go. Please, don't leave me." After that incident, I braced myself for him to keep pestering me. But surprisingly, 5 months passed, and it was as if Ryan had vanished. Later, I found out why. Ryan had married Susan. Apparently, after causing a scene at my college, Quinn and I reported him to the police. He returned to his university with a major disciplinary record. Drowning in frustration, he turned to alcohol. One night, in a drunken stupor, he went to Susan's place. They ended up in bed. Susan then threatened him if he didn't marry her, she would ruin his life completely. And so, while still in his 3rd year of college, Ryan was forced into a rushed and shabby wedding back in the village. When I learned about it, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. 8 years after graduating, I returned to the village for the first time. This time, it wasn't for personal reasons. I was here to discuss building a girls' school. Over the years, my computer training business had flourished, expanding to 3 branches. But no matter how far I had come, I could never forget the longing in the eyes of young village girls. Girls like me, who desperately craved knowledge. When I earned my 2nd major paycheck, I shared my plan to build a school. Quinn was incredibly supportive, and came with me to the village. That spring, we walked through the fields with local officials, discussing potential locations for the school. Suddenly, a sharp, furious voice cut through the air, stopping everyone in their tracks. "You useless drunk. All you do is drink. Why don't you just drink yourself to death already?" Susan stood in front of a house, clutching a baby in her arms. With a vicious kick, she sent a man stumbling out the door. His hair was a mess, his clothes tattered, resembling a homeless man. He rolled twice on the ground before settling there, taking swigs from a bottle of cheap liquor. Then, as if sensing something, he suddenly froze. His gaze locked onto mine. Under his tangled hair, the once bright red birthmark beneath his eye had long since faded. The surrounding villagers muttered in awe. "That's Professor Carter, isn't it?" Seeing the scene unfold, several town officials quickly moved to shield me. The village chief scolded, "Get back inside. Don't come out here scaring people." Ryan finally snapped out of his daze. The bottle in his hand slipped and shattered on the ground. Staring at his own rough, calloused hands, he clutched his hair, pulling at it violently. And then, like a madman, he began mumbling apologies over and over. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I had heard about his downfall. After marrying Susan, he had become depressed, eventually developing a drinking problem. Day after day, he wasted away at home, no better than a walking corpse. Susan, who had once gone to such great lengths to marry him, now regretted it more than anything. At that moment, Susan stormed out of the house, drawn by the commotion. The instant she saw me, her expression twisted with rage. She spat on the ground. "What the hell are you looking at? Trying to rekindle old feelings? Fine, take him. Pick up this pile of trash and get out of here." "Don't talk about Emily like that." Ryan Carter suddenly jumped up, shoving Susan. They began wrestling in the dirt, screaming accusations at each other. "This is all your fault," Ryan shouted. "You ruined my life." The so-called perfect love story of my past life had crumbled into something utterly pathetic. Halfway through the school construction process, Susan packed up her child and left the village. Not long after, Ryan also disappeared. Maybe he changed his name again and started over somewhere far away. But this time, I no longer cared. On the day the girls' school was completed, I returned to the village once more. A 6-story school building now stood proudly at the village entrance. White walls, red-tiled roofs, it looked like a great crane spreading its wings. On the playground, a group of girls in blue and white uniforms were jumping rope, their laughter filling the air. A little girl with pigtails ran up to me, tugging at my sleeve. "Can I be as amazing as you when I grow up?" I knelt down and wiped a smudge of dirt from her cheek. "Of course you can," I said with a smile. "If you study hard, one day, you'll be even greater than me." These chattering, giggling little girls, some of them once herded cattle in the fields, some had spent their days stoking fires at the kitchen stove, and some had almost been sold off in arranged marriages. But now they sat in bright classrooms, holding textbooks in their hands, their eyes filled with hope. As the sun set, the school building was bathed in the golden hues of dusk. High above, a plane soared across the sky, leaving behind a brilliant white contrail. I looked at the faces of the smiling girls in front of me, and I smiled too. "Fly, girls, fly high,"